Welcome to the Social Spitball Show with your host, Bram Sarkowski. This is your forum to discuss politics, religion, democracy, and sometimes even music, sports, and culture. Please join Bram and your co-hosts, George Fisher and Barbara D'Antonio. Let's get the conversation going. All right. This is your man in Amsterdam, Bram Sarkowski. Here on a Thursday night for the Social Spitball Show follow-up hour. And on the line, I believe we have Madison Page, who's going to talk to us about some voting issues in Texas. Madison, you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
All right, you're very welcome. George, do you happen to be on the line as well?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we got George and Madison. George, this past Tuesday we had the primary in Texas, and my understanding is that there's certainly a different situation in Texas than you and I are used to here in North Carolina when it comes to primary voting. Maybe you could sort of set that up a little bit before Madison talks about it.
Well, Rachel Maddow last night on MSNBC did a wonderful job of pointing out that there's voter suppression in Texas, more so than in a lot of other states, because Texas has what they call an open primary system, which means that you go into your precinct polling place and you ask the polling representative there, she'll ask you, do you want a Democratic ballot or do you want a Republican ballot? Because they do both at the same time, so you have to tell them. And if you say Democrat, then you're announcing it to the whole world. And if it's a small Texas town, which a lot of them are, it's very intimidating. When you live in a town that maybe has 10,000, 15,000 people, 80% of them are Tea Party members, and they're very adamant about that. And you have a small business, you can get blackballed very easily. So there is intimidation there, and there's other kinds of intimidation when you're at the polls. You know, they don't necessarily play fair, and by playing fair, I'm talking about they don't hold a gun to your head, obviously, but they do intimidate you. If you're a Democrat, they don't want you to vote. That's the whole key. So yeah, there's some very serious issues down there.
Okay. And Madison, are you based in Texas, or are you just kind of an expert on the way things happen in Texas?
Well, I'm with Bold Blue Media, so we focus on state and local politics. So it's our job to sort of know about what's going on electorally in all the states.
Okay.
I've got a lot of strong connections in Texas, and for folks that are friends of mine and people who are activists in Texas, from the state party all the way on down. And these reports have been coming in to us for the last 24 hours or so, and it's very, very disappointing. But I think it's also very important to understand that, just as was earlier mentioned, that Texas is not the only state with an open primary. There's a lot of them, and this is something that we need to be paying attention to in a lot of these other states, particularly states where there's going to be, tight races this year.
Absolutely.
Like Michigan, Wisconsin, those are open primary seats. Georgia, these are states that all have open primaries, just like Texas does, and these are states that Democrats are actually becoming very strong in. So these are tactics. We know how the Republicans work. They don't just do one thing in one place, and that's it. It's usually sort of just more strategic than that. We have to pay attention to that. But, yeah, we've been getting reports from Texas about this type of thing, and it's anti-democratic. Okay.
Well, I mean, you said you were getting some in the last, say, 24, 48 hours, I would imagine, since the primary on Tuesday. What specifically can you get into? What sort of calls are you getting? What sort of panic calls or what sort of crises fires are you putting out?
We've got folks who are saying that they were given the wrong polling information. That people are confronting them outside the polls and telling them, that you're in the wrong place, you have to go somewhere else, and they're being sort of sent on wild goose chases. There's a lot of confusion with regard to, what you need to bring with you, your voter ID, these laws that have been changed by these states over the last year or so. So there's a lot of confusion. The electorate is not clear on what they need to have, what they need to do, and I think that a lot of these poll workers are in the position to be able to have a negative impact on the democratic process, and they're doing it.
Okay. And forgive my ignorance. Is this related to the law that I heard that I sort of equated with our voting omnibus voting law here in North Carolina, but it was the law I heard about that the former Speaker of the House that was from Texas, even he was affected by it, and Wendy Davis because of her married and divorced names situation. Is that the same thing?
It's in the same category. I mean, what's happened is that the voter laws have changed so drastically because of the Supreme Court decision last year about the Voting Rights Act. And so many states are just sort of moving very quickly to make changes, and unfortunately, awareness campaigns can't even keep up with it. And so voters are not fully informed, and sometimes they're showing up, and as is the case that happened in Texas, I had a couple of folks say, that they were told you have to have this and you have to have that. And, if you're in a car and you're driving and you have enough money to get back and forth two or three times, that may be one thing. But some people don't. Right? Yeah. Some people are relying on a ride to the polls or something like that. This can place a real burden on folks who are just trying to exercise their constitutional right to vote.
You're listening to the Social Spitball Show on blogtalkradio.com with your host, Bram Sarkowski, and featuring Barbara D'Antonio and George Fisher. Now, let's rejoin the conversation. All right, and this is Bram Sarkowski, and we are back.
I'm a voter from Texas. I'd like to weigh in on this if I could.
Okay.
On the changing at the polls, which I do believe is very essential. I went through the voter suppression process just recently, and we don't even have to change any laws to do that. Now, when it comes to the disabled, they usually are allowed to absentee vote. So if they go for that, they don't have a problem. But when you're in a Republican area like I am, it's a county of 10,449 people. 41 Democrats voted. You have to go in and declare out loud, I want a Democrat ballot. Well, if you run a business, you've got customers in there that have been for 2 years or longer. They've had the Republican representative and the most read local newspapers bashing Democrats and especially the president, trying to build as much hostility as possible. That doesn't go over well with customers, friends, or family that are Republicans. They could fix that so easily. They don't even try to fix it, but they could. You could go in, and if on a table off to the side, so you have to declare whether you want Democrat or Republican because that's a closed primary. They have 2 separate ballots for each party. Why you have to declare, but you don't have to do it out loud. They could have this set on a table off to the side with a box for Democrat ballots, a box for Republican ballots. There could be a little screen so that only the clerk is watching. The rest of every other voter in the room isn't watching. You could pick the ballot that you want, quietly hand it to the clerk. She could document it. Then you could take your ballot and go in and vote. And nobody would have to know who you're voting for. And it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And they make us write on the paper, Democrats on left, Republicans on right, and everybody that comes into the room to vote can read the list and know who voted for what.
Wow.
They could have a separate form, one for Democrats, one Republicans. They could hand you the form for you to sign and then take it back instead of leaving it on the table for everybody that comes in to vote to read.
Wow. Right.
I've been really upset about this because I do run a business, and I did go in and vote, and I had one of my best customers in the room at the time I voted, and when I said I want a Democrat ballot, I got a look that still stings. And I know I lost him as a customer. I've had him. He's been a customer for a long time, and he has told me repeatedly that anyone that voted for President Obama or a Democrat is not a very intelligent person, and they would never work for him, or they would never do his business. And there's a lot like that. So it's extremely intimidating.